Greetings again, Cantaloupe here with another installment on this ongoing project I have for building a online hosting tool for videos, images, content, online content, music, stuff like that. So let's get caught up real quick. I have added basically one new feature since my last video on this subject. And I spent enough time on this one feature. There's some very important things I think would be useful to people who are using this framework, that is Vue.js, JavaScript framework, because I ran into a pretty significant gotcha on this one. It was a new bug for me in my experience, but I solved it, and I think that anybody who's building, for example, a drop-down menu, which is where I encountered this bug, might benefit from what I learned. So not to take up too much time on this one thing, but just to review where I'm at in the project, I have added so many things at this point on my list. I'm almost done with the list. I only have a couple of things left, and that is the social components, that is comments, voting, but the problem I have is there's almost no screen space left at this point. There's buttons in every corner. So I took a long, hard look at what the structure of the site has to offer as far as real estate. Now, this is a challenge, a real big challenge, because I've mentioned in previous videos there's something called responsive programming, responsive web design, and that is catering to a wide variety or range of users and their devices, not knowing what their specific aspect ratios or screens are going to be necessarily. Responsive doesn't assume that they're on a computer or laptop necessarily, or a phone, something, or anything in between. It provides for everything if you do it right. So with that said, I had an opportunity in my design to improve something very substantially. That is, I had a container of buttons for the user to access a set of tools. It was a toolbar near the header, or actually just below the header, and the problem was some of the elements were only visible when the user was logged in, for example. Other ones were visible all the time. So I thought I was being smart by making them, there's the display type can be set to inline block, if you're familiar with that. What that means is the containers, or the divs in this case, act as if they are wrappable text characters, like individually. That's how I think about it. So they will stack up horizontally, from left to right, or right to left if you set it that way, but horizontally, and then wrap as needed, which is the key feature, versus display type block, which is it just by default takes up the full width of wherever it is, and there's no wrapping. It just takes up all the horizontal space available. So inline block is nice, not to get too much into style sheets, or CSS is cascading style sheets. So anyway, I had set it to inline block, which means that as the screen size grows or shrinks, these optional or conditional containers would wrap to the next line if necessary. So a couple of immediate problems that are obvious, like now I got to deal with spacing with the next section down, which is your actual payload, your content, with the pictures, the cards, all the data and information for the user. Suddenly there's like a roadblock, or not a roadblock, like a traffic jam with the content on the main screen versus this bar right above it that may be an unknown height depending on the width. So anyway, long story short, what I did is I got rid of that. I deleted the toolbar completely and went to something that may be obvious. It wasn't obvious to me right away, but I made a drop-down menu from scratch. So I want to share real quick because I have 5 minutes already and I haven't even got started. So try to wrap it up. I made a drop-down menu using only CSS, and the key points that I took away from this, and I've sort of dabbled with this in the past, and some people are super wizards at this, and I admit it was a learning opportunity for me just to get it working and working how I needed to. But it's done now, and I want to tell you what I did. So you have a container, and it responds to a hover event or a touch event if you're on a touch screen, and then it shows, of course, what's in that column or that menu item, what's below it. And then you may have nested menus, sub-menus, that when you hover or touch those items, more things may expand. And to get it so that it works correctly and that when you actually click those menu items, they do what they're supposed to do, can be a real challenge. I mean, I built the menu itself completely separately from this project. I just kind of split off an open file, just opened a brand new file and coded the menu as sort of a scaffolding or framework. And then once it was working, now here's the very interesting thing. I copied it back into my Vue project. So I have a Vue.js application that I'm working on. And no joke, I spent 2 days trying to get this thing integrated. And it worked fine. Everything was working fine except for one minor detail. I had, and I refused. I could have just said, okay, it's close enough, and ran with it. But no, I said I want all the things that I had working in my prototype to actually successfully integrate into the new app, however important they may or may not be. So I refused to settle for less than 100%. So I got it working, and the thing that wasn't working was the on-click events. So I added sort of an optional on-click for the menu items. The menu was expanding properly, it was displaying its contents properly, but obviously you want to be able to interact with it or else it's useless. So in my case it wasn't useless because I'm embedding content with other buttons that were working fine, but potentially you don't want to have to input a component or an object in there. You just want to be able to click a menu item and have it do something. So that was why I refused to settle. So anyway, the problem I had in Vue, to cut to the chase, I was not understanding, and this has sort of been a problem in the past for reactivity applications that I've worked on. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background that you don't see. There's no errors if it doesn't work, and it's designed to be super streamlined, and it does a great deal of optimizing by default. And it's good that it does that until there's a problem that involves the reactivity in a way that it isn't obvious, because you don't get a lot of feedback necessarily. It's part of its inner working. So what I learned was when I put my markup, if you know what that is, that's just the HTML for the containers and the content for the menu. I had been originally looping through that when the component is loaded, just looping once. It just quickly it recurses, or was recursing, I should say, from the menu, the root menu node, which is just the topmost container for the menu, and it was just recursing through all the sub containers. And it was looking for an optional attribute. If you know what that is, you can create whatever attributes you want within your tags. And I had one called code. So I wanted to just, when the component is loaded, it recurses through the menu and attaches the code, if any, for every subcontainer or submenu to an on-click event. Sounds simple, right? So I just want to be able to click a menu item and have it execute the code that is stipulated in the attribute. right in the markup. Okay, well, it was working in my prototype until I moved it to Vue.js. Now, I'm absolutely not trash talking Vue.js. This was my ignorance about how reactivity works. The solution, it didn't work for 2 days. Now it's working. The solution was to just get rid of the I was trying to micromanage it, and this is 90% of the time, if you're having problems with reactivity, it's because you're trying to do something vanilla when it's providing that for you, and that's exactly what this was. So what I ended up doing is just I got rid of my whole subroutine that recursed through the menu, and I just put in at symbol click, which is a Vue.js style event listener for each element that I wanted to have listen for a click, and it worked. It starts working, and I didn't want to do it that way until I understood why it wasn't working. Now here's why. This is the last point I'll make. What was happening in the background with Vue.js was it was refactoring is the word they use. I did some research and I figured out what's going on. Your markup that you feed to Vue.js or any reactivity framework is not the same elements that end up being fed to the DOM, if you know what that is, your browser. You're going to get something that may be wildly different. It's not going to be the same elements. It might change the actual type of element. It might change the element from. It might just create a new one of the same type. It's got a lot of stuff, and I don't fully understand how all that works. But the problem I was having was I was attaching the event listeners to elements that were then just being completely deleted due to the reactivity, and there's not going to be a click if it's not listening anymore. So using the provided event listeners solved the problem, long story short. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. The menu's working now, and again, the whole reason for the menu is so that I can move on to the final steps of this project. To add anything else, I needed more real estate, and the way you do that is you make a system. So that's what I did. Send any questions to my email. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye. Cantaloupe here with part 2 of this video. These two parts are so similar, I decided to combine them into a single video. The first part, you just watched probably about drop-down menus and the opportunities in Vue.js to get those to work correctly. So I'm working on a new feature, almost on the heels of that commentary. This one is it was actually the point of doing all that so that I could have space, some kind of real estate on the screen to add yet another feature, one of the last few features that I need to do for this app, and that is it's going to be a system for users to manage their assets. So if you recall what the purpose of the site is, it's a hosting service for digital content, images, pictures, videos, that kind of thing. It's going to be in the vein of like Imgur, some of the popular sites you've probably already seen online. And if you recall, Imgur has a way of collecting or creating groups of pictures or items, and I wanted to implement something similar, not even like identical to what they do design-wise, but something functional that serves my own purposes, inspired perhaps by other things I've seen online, including Imgur. So not trying to ride on their coattails. I keep mentioning them, but it's more in the context of needing to get away from their site because of some major problems that my account is currently having. It's completely broken. I can't do anything on their site. I can't download or access it. I'm not here to trash Imgur, but anyway, so the collections are implemented at this point, and I want to cover just a couple of details about that. So the collections are perhaps obvious, maybe they're not completely obvious how to set that up. It's a linkage between items, and a little bit of thought needs to be put into something like this before it is rolled out so that it can be functional without painting yourself into a corner, so to speak. Now, this is sort of a very big subject in programming and app management or development in general, where you have to plan for growth. And this is almost the entire impetus behind object-oriented programming, modularity, prototypes, that kind of thing, where you can use a model to create a class, or you build on top of, or you're able to move code from one program or section of a program into another and understand that it's going to do the exact same things and it's not going to have any problems, or major problems at least. So while I'm not a fan or user primarily of object-oriented programming, I don't particularly care for it. It's overly, not to get too much into that, but it's extremely verbose. It's a little too strict and formal for my style. I prefer functional programming, which is the alternative, I guess, or one of the alternatives. I still keep in mind, and this is the whole point, I keep in mind modularity and compartmentalizing code in a way that allows for the growth and transportability that object-oriented programming is geared towards. So, with that said, it's a mouthful, but in implementing this new system, I have kept as many avenues open as possible for things that may eventually be included but aren't realized yet in the software. So I have added a way for collections to actually have their own properties, almost all of the exact same properties that each individual asset supports. So that's a vote, or upvotes, downvotes, comments, and while I haven't completely implemented all of that stuff as far as being functional and ready to go, it's wired up for it. And at some point, I'll have time to finish all that, but it doesn't need to happen right away. It's just kind of a little bit of boilerplate, and I'm taking a little extra time to make sure that it's supporting and including all of those features. So what is completely done and working is a new system, and it needs to be more prominently featured, I think, on the front page, because you have to look through a menu to find it at the moment. But when you click the new tool for managing collections, it's going to automatically detect if you have any, at least one, and if you do not, then it shows you by default the wizard, or whatever you want to call it, that allows you to create one. Or if you actually have some already, it will show you a list, and it's in a table form, and it's becoming pretty intuitive to look at, a little user-friendly. I put a little bit of time into it, so it's going to show you the name, the description. It's going to show you how old it is, and also when it was created, depending on which view of the date you prefer to look at. And then it's got an edit button, so obviously you're going to want to be able to change the details. I think that's a nice feature. Some websites force you to delete something if the title is wrong or the comment is wrong. You got to start all over. Nah. I'm trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. So continuing with that idea, actually I implemented a save button, because you see save buttons and they make sense, but you don't really necessarily need them all the time. And our internet is so fast. Most people now, it's for text-based stuff like changing a title or a description, it's no big strain on the front or the back end to, with every keystroke, and I've done this in quite a few apps at this point, and I don't see it anywhere else. I don't know why people don't do this more often, but every time you update a field, every time you change a word or a single character, it's going to there's no save button, it just shoots the updated value to the server instantly. So as you're typing, it's saving, and it's a nice feature for a couple of reasons. You don't have to actually click save, and say the computer gets turned off or the power goes out right in the middle of your work, well, you're up to date already. Every keystroke you're up to date, which is a really nice feature. The drawback or the hazard, and there is one, is you need a backup system with that. And I don't have one in this app yet, but I might at some point. So a backup system, because what if, you accidentally select all the text, and then you hit backspace, and then you, in the same gesture, accidentally close the page. It's unlikely, but at that point, you're hosed without a backup. So speed can be good, it can be bad. Anyway, so the other features I've implemented so far in the collections are, it shows you obviously which items are present. There's going to be a way to include those. If you create one or more collections, there will be some way on each card or each tile, each asset tile, to join it to one or more collections, and it's going to be hopefully super easy. I haven't quite crossed that bridge yet. And the fun part is you can not only toggle visibility within this whole system as far as whether an asset or a whole collection is public. It's the link now. Okay, here's the thing: if somebody navigates directly to the link, they're going to see the content. It's not hidden in terms of that nobody can find it. It's guaranteed secure, nothing like that. But it's not going to be featured anywhere. And the ID slugs are generated in a very large space at random, and those can't be sequentially searched. I guess you could technically write some algorithm. It would get blocked by the host before it actually found it much of use. But anyway, it's not 100% secure, but you're not going to be featured in any galleries if your content or your assets are marked private. So with that said, all of the items, all of the assets have that feature, and all of the collections and items within the collections also have that feature. And it's already wired up so that when you view other people's collections or assets, you can add those to your own collection. So you can create as many arbitrary groups, or we'll call them collections, and add as many items that are public or that you own. So if they're your own assets, like I say own, they're uploaded under your account, you can see them, you can add them, you can delete them, and you can also add anything that's public that anybody else has within the system. So just a lot of nice features. That's 10 minutes. This is going to be one of my longer videos because it's joined together. But again, thanks for joining, and if you have any questions, reach out via email, whitehotrobot@gmail.com. Have a good day.